All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I know we have a few more hopping on, but we want to go ahead and get started. It is high noon. Hopefully you're enjoying your lunch as you join us today. I am not going to take up much time because you all know me and you all know this is the third part of our marketing trends series with Brooke Anderson from Converge. Hopefully you have gotten a lot out of this and been taking some notes and learned. We've had really good feedback from the people that have been attending these. So we do want to thank Brooke and all of her knowledge and expertise. So I'm just going to turn it right over to her and let her take it away. She's got River with her today, so he might pop his head up a little. He's our favorite. But anyway, if you guys have questions during this, please put them in the chat, or we will try and save some time at the end. But Brooke, I'm going to turn it right over.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Courtney, and thanks to everybody for joining. Some of you I know have been to the first two parts of this, and there may be some folks here that this is their first part. That's okay. What I've done is just included a brief review of the other trends that we have talked about. I am going to warn you at the outset, this first part of that review is going to go kind of quickly, so I make sure I have time for the new trends that we'll be talking about. But you will get a copy of the presentation so you can go through those first trends if you missed those a little bit more thoroughly on your own. I also am not someone that puts everything I say on my PowerPoint slides. So now is your opportunity to grab a pad and a pen to take some notes as we're going through some of this. So let me go ahead and pull up my presentation here. Okay. All right. So just very briefly, I know, like I said, I've seen some of you in the previous sections, but just briefly a little bit about Converge. We are a full service marketing agency that is based in the Shenandoah Valley, but we serve clients that are located here, there, and everywhere. And by full service, that means we can do everything for you from business cards to websites, lead generation. We also do signs, we do vehicle wraps. So we have a lot going on if you are ever in need of marketing services. These are some of the clients that we are very, very proud and fortunate to serve in our area and beyond. And as I mentioned, we do all of the services you see on that screen as well as what you are looking at right now. So anything that you would need for your marketing, we would be glad to talk with you about that. What I tell people about what my job is I'm basically a glorified storyteller, because story is the most impactful thing that you can do with your marketing. And so we really work hard with our clients to be able to effectively tell people not only who they are and what they do and how they do it, but why they do the things they do. So again, if you have any marketing needs, feel free to reach out after the presentation is over. So we're here to talk today about trends in 2022. And the really kind of interesting thing about marketing trends in 2022 is that we've had 2 years of the pandemic, which have really changed consumer behavior in some very significant ways. And so, we always keep track of trends year to year, but over these past 2 years, we've seen some very, very interesting things happening in the realm of marketing. We use the word trends, and sometimes people think trends mean fads, but that is not the case. When we are presenting these things, we're doing so because we really believe that these are going to not just be fly by night things that happen just this year, but that they will have some impact this year and beyond. So let's review the trends that we've talked about. And this is the part that's going to kind of go pretty quickly. But again, you'll get the presentation so you can review this in more depth on your own. So we know that the pandemic has changed consumers in some pretty significant ways. The past 2 years have been a time of reflection. People have sort of reevaluated what is important to them, and they brought that into their purchasing behavior. So basically, the key takeaway from this trend is that consumers are not evaluating you just on if you're better than your competition. They are evaluating you based on their last great experience with you. So consumers in 2022 aren't as likely to be loyal to you just because they've been with you for a long time. If you have a bad experience with a consumer, even though that might be the first bad experience they have with you, that can really send them right on over to your competition. So you really need to be honed in on having consistent and cohesive customer service. They are also expecting everything to be hyper personalized. So doing things like putting names in your email subject lines, putting names in your email greetings, anything that you can do to make things personalized. Consumers in 2022 are going to respond to that. And remember, customer service is holistic. It's not just a department in your business. The second trend that we reviewed in earlier sessions is centered around corporate social responsibility. And basically what we know is that consumers are looking really, really hard at how businesses are working all the way around, not only how they treat consumers, but how do they treat their workforce? Are they good stewards of finances? Are they giving back to the community? So these are all things that are going to be important to those 2022 consumers. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that if someone asks you about these areas of responsibility, that you have good answers for them, and not just good answers, but that you're actually doing tangible things to make a difference in these areas. One great example of a company that does really great with corporate social responsibility is Subaru, not only in what they're doing, but how they're conveying the messaging. So this is an example of that. And you can go and look at some of the marketing that Subaru does and glean from that a good way to conceptualize your own messaging around corporate social responsibility. The third trend that we discussed is data. So it used to be way back when that it was sort of like the vibe of marketing was it was enough to know that you would put a billboard up, or that you would put a commercial on TV, or that you had done these checklists of marketing things. The checklist is still relevant, but you have to be evaluating how effective these things are in the market. And the tools that we have now to analyze the effectiveness, all the data that we have access to now, especially with platforms like Facebook, gives us a really good insight into what is and isn't working with your audience. All of us are going to have a sense of what we think is going to work with our audience, but the data is the thing that's going to tell us if we are correct or not. And as a person that is a marketing professional that sort of eats, breathes, and sleeps this stuff, as wonderful and educated as our intuition can be, there's always exciting things that the data is revealing to us that we wouldn't know if we weren't tracking it. So you must be tracking your data of your campaigns. So the other thing that's important to remember is that we used to talk about audiences in terms of target audiences. So we say, well, your audience is the 18 to 24-year-old that is likely a college student, or your audience is the 65 and plus who are likely retired. That used to be enough to categorize our target audiences that way. Now what we know is that there is an extra layer of depth to those audiences. And so it's not enough to just say, hey, we're going to target the retired folks. There are going to be subsections within there, and you're going to need to focus your market accordingly. Cookie cutter solutions are not cutting it with our 2022 consumers. Remember, people want to have hyper personalized marketing. So that cookie cutter blanket marketing just isn't going to cut it. To know who your target audience is and the subsections of those, you have to know what's important to them. And these are some of the items that you would be evaluating that on. So again, you can kind of review this in more detail after the presentation is sent to you. But understanding what is important to your audience is key. And this isn't just going to be based on what your inclination is. You're going to want to do some research on this. It isn't always the things that we think. The big one people think that matters the most to everybody is price. That isn't always the case. So be open-minded about this when you're doing research to evaluate what is actually, when you drill down, important to your audience. There are 5 main categories that a really great study was done on. It's the EY Consumer Index, and it identified 5 categories that are most important to those 2022 consumers, and the percentage of people that responded for one of these categories being the most important. So make sure you review these and use this as a guideline when you are sorting out what is important to your clients and identifying that. So make sure to review this slide when you receive the presentation. A holistic approach to your content is going to also be very important for 2022. People want to know, again, that you're hitting on all those levels of corporate social responsibility. They're not going to know that if you don't tell them. And so you want to make sure that that type of content is incorporated into your website, your social media, your email marketing. So a holistic approach to that content is very important to conveying your message. The other thing that 2022 consumers are really focused on is privacy, data privacy. So here we are as marketers and businesses wanting to really evaluate data, while at the same time, consumers are really important with their data being protected. And you saw a lot of this come out because Apple really took a bold stand and said, hey, we're not just going to be your cell phone provider of choice or your technology provider of choice. We are going to be the front runners in terms of people being confident that their data is protected when they're using our products. And you saw this really impact things that are going on Facebook, for instance. There were lawsuits, there were all kinds of things happening. So data privacy is key. So you want to be collecting data and have a plan for that. And you want to make sure that you are doing that in a way where people know that you're not using that data for anything other than what you say that you are. And you have to be really, really committed to that you're getting only the data that you absolutely need. And there's some other things that you can review in the slideshow from the previous presentation that will help you conceptualize questions to answer so that you make sure that your data privacy is set up correctly and communicated correctly. This is only going to grow. You're only going to see more and more of this in the media. For instance, heavy hitters like Apple in 2021, they gave users the ability to deny being tracked by third-party apps. That tracking by third-party apps is what actually tailors what ads that you're going to see when you go on social media and stuff. So we're still seeing how that's going to play out. In 2022, they're going to enact better privacy for their email platforms, and Google is discontinuing the use of third-party cookies, which is a tracking mechanism on Chrome. So you're just going to see more and more of this coming out as the years go on. So with this expectation of privacy, again, remember to obtain permission to collect the data in the first place, collect as little information as possible, use it in a way that you have permission for, and safeguard information against unauthorized access. 2022 consumers are looking for that. And then if the consumer asks for it, they should be able to get the data that you have tracked on them. So make sure you have a way to do that. And then on every website, you should have a privacy statement. In most websites, this is at the bottom in the footer, but make sure you have a privacy statement. Okay, trend number 5 that we reviewed previously is that you must make sure that your website is optimized for mobile. In 2022, you think that most businesses have done this, but we run into businesses every day where their website is not optimized for mobile. 50 to 85% of people are going to look at your website on their phone. And so people have very short attention spans and very short or very low tolerance for information that isn't formatted correctly or having to scroll too far to click on anything. So make sure that you are optimizing your website for mobile. And you can see on here tips that we've included in the presentation that you can review for things that you want to make sure are included. All right, so let's dive into our next set of trends. So trend number 6 is that video reigns supreme, and we have seen video grow in importance throughout the years, and it has never been more important than in 2022. So previously, consumers responded well to video content. Now they are expecting it. So if you do not have some level of video content included in your website, included in your social media, included in your messaging, you are not going to be seen as relevant as your competition that is including it. So how does that break down? What do you want to be focused on? When you're doing video content, the really cool thing is that almost all of us have the capability to do this simply by what we have in our pocket, which is our smartphones. So anybody can create some pretty great video content in this day and age. What is also a trend is that we're moving away from everything having to be high production value. So you no longer need to hire a film crew to come and film content for you. The style is really more of a relatable, friendly, reality style versus the high production. So that's good news to all of us, because that means that it is more accessible and it's easier to create than ever before. The things that audiences in 2022 are really responding to are things that have a behind the scenes vibe. So they're getting to see something about your business that they normally would not be able to see. We call this the remarkability factor. And when we say the word remarkability, I think sometimes people think like, oh, it has to be something like really kind of crazy, like it has to be fireworks going off and it has to be, so exciting and, all this time and effort and money put into it. That's not what we're talking about. What we're actually talking about is showing people something they don't normally get to see. So, for instance, if you own a bakery, a lot of people haven't seen a day in the life of a baker when you're getting in at 5 a.m. and what it takes to present those lovely baked goods in your case. We're just the customers showing up and getting those things. But it is a remarkability factor to see behind the scenes of how in the world do you create all these wonderful things. So sometimes people are struggle and they think, oh, well, we don't have a remarkability factor. I guarantee you do. There's something about your business that people aren't able to access on a day-to-day basis. And that is some of the content that you want to make sure that you are including. One of the big social media channels that's influenced a lot of this, that also coincided with rising and wild popularity during the pandemic, is TikTok. So if you're absolutely stumped, go onto TikTok, find the TikTok channels of some businesses that you like, see some of the ways that people are formatting this content. It's on TikTok, it's not all about the dances. It's a lot about seeing like behind the scenes of things, finding a niche and plugging into that. So go to TikTok for some inspiration if you're just absolutely stuck. All right. So what does this actually translate to? What we're seeing is that consumers are spending 2 to 6 times longer on a website that uses video content. So everybody is concerned about how long that users are spending on page of their website. The more video that you can incorporate on the website, the more engaging it is, the more likely they are to spend time there. The thing you want to really make sure of, and this is where your dev team or your website builder comes into play, is making sure that your load speeds aren't completely drained by having a ton of video on your website. This also applies to one of the other trends with the mobile optimization, so that your site doesn't take long to load onto mobile. We also know that websites using video are 53 times more likely to obtain first page search results. The world that we live in is kind of ruled in many ways online by Google and the Google algorithm. And like it or not, Google is going through and they're scanning websites and they're evaluating them on a list of very specific things. One of those things is how engaging your content is, how relevant your content is, and video comes into play here. So if you are at a point where you are really trying to grow your ranking on Google, video is a great way to try to boost that organically before you are doing things like paying for Google ads and such. As a whole, what we see is that videos create 300% more traffic across all platforms. So whether you are, using Facebook primarily or Instagram, certainly YouTube, of course, you want to include video into that content and on your website, and even placing content in your email campaigns, video reigns supreme there. So just keep that in mind. All right, trend number 7. This is a question that I have gotten a lot, and it is about blogging. So people are asking me fairly often, like, is blogging still relevant? Is blogging still a thing? And what we know in 2022 is absolutely. Consumers in 2022 are still reading blogs. So for those of you that have blogs, for those of you that are wondering if you should start one, you should continue if you're already doing it, and you should most definitely start one if you haven't already. Google, again, is going to evaluate your website, like it or not, on how much relevant new content you're placing on there. And you want to have new content every so often so that the Google algorithm is picking that up and ranking you higher. And a blog is a wonderful way to do that. We're going to talk about how you should sort of start conceptualizing that. What we know is that most consumers are reporting that they read multiple blogs regularly, and they're making purchases based on that blog content. So another reason why blogs are still relevant. We also know that B2B marketers who use blogs receive 67% more leads than those who do not. Another thing that a blog can do is not only help you sell something, but it positions you as a thought leader. When people can show up and see content that you've generated that is basically expert advice, that helps them trust you more. And if your blog is providing them with what we call value adds or useful tools that they can take with them and use that make their life easier, that also lends to that trust and makes them more likely to do business with you. So it's a lead generation. People are making purchases from it. It helps position you as a thought leader. And these are all reasons why you should be blogging. Those who have prioritized blogging are 13 times more likely to have a positive return on that investment. And remember, one of the reasons I get the question of are blogs still relevant is because it's been around for a while. And sometimes we think, well, something's been around for a while, maybe it's not as relevant. Blogging has busted that myth. Just because it's been around for a while, it doesn't mean it isn't valuable. What we know is it's a tried and true tool. Okay. So if you're thinking about blogging, what I want you to do is prioritize consistency when you decide on the frequency of your blog. So in other words, if what you have the bandwidth and the time to do is a monthly blog, awesome. Start with a monthly blog. What you don't want to do is tell your audience, hey, we're going to have a weekly blog, and then in 3 weeks, that's off the rails. Value consistency over frequency. Be very honest with yourself about what you're able to accomplish. Nothing is worse than arriving on a website, you go to their blog page and they haven't posted a blog in a year. That's actually going to work against you. So don't do that. Be realistic, do what you can do. If that's once a month, awesome, start there. Also, make your content work double duty for you and your other marketing efforts. So a great way to do this is if you have an email nurturing campaign and you're sending content through that channel, use that and post it as a blog on your website, or vice versa. If you already have a blog, take that blog info and use that as the content you're sending out to the email list. You can also dissect your blog content and use chunks of it for social media posts along with an applicable visual or a video. So make that content, you're going to put some effort here. So make that content work double duty and stretch it as far as you can. Before you start writing, or if you're at a point of evaluating how effective your blog is, you want to make sure that you're using a tone that your audience best responds to. So we work with some industries like healthcare and banking, where there are very strict rules about how you have to write things. It's very professional. And there's not a lot of room for things like humor. So fine, that's what that audience expects. That's what we're going to do. But for many of you, you have businesses where you can show a bit more personality, and your audience will likely respond well to that too. And if you're tracking the data, then like we talked about before, then you'll start to get a sense of like, what is the type of content blogs that people are responding best to. So feel free to put your personality in that. If any of you follow our or are a member of our email list through Converge, we send out emails every Friday, and you'll notice we use humor. We use what I call kind of like casual street language. It's not all buttoned up. So make sure that you are letting the personality of your business shine through in these. Again, ask yourself, what value adds can you give to your audience? What problem can you help them solve? Another thing that's going to help an audience connect with you is if you take half an hour and you sit down and you go through and make a list of what are the pain points of people that are coming to us. So if I'm an internet provider, what pain points are people walking through the door with? They're probably frustrated because their internet's too slow, or it's too expensive, or it's this, that, or the other. If you can proactively address these things, like in your blogs and your social media content and your email marketing, then that will help people really feel like, oh my gosh, this place understands me. I haven't even had to say what I'm frustrated about. They're already addressing it and providing solutions. That can be very, very impactful. Another value add hack that is wildly effective is, let's say you are in real estate. One of your blog posts or your value add posts could be, hey, here's how you should interview a real estate agent. Here are the exact questions that you should be asking. You're not telling them, hey, you need to be interviewing us. You're giving them a value add. You're giving them a list that they could take to any real estate agent. But you bet your bottom dollar that if you're creating that list, you're going to have great answers to every single one of those questions. And that leads to a trust factor where they're like, well, hey, they're not even trying to sell me on interviewing them. They're just giving me a helpful tool that I can use anywhere, which ironically makes them want to do business with you. So think through things that are value adds and help people solve problems. And then it would be wonderful as an organizational tool to come up with an editorial calendar. Basically, this is a really simple tool where you think, okay, I'm going to do a blog post once a month. That's 12 posts. And pre-think through what the topics are going to be from month to month. And what you'll see is that, you'll get into a very nice flow of being able to build on the previous content. And it's just a good way to help organize your thoughts. And the other question we get asked a lot is, your blog doesn't always have to come from one person. If you're able to make blogging a team sport, so it's not draining the bandwidth of any one person too much. It also is a great way for people to hear the voice of other people on your team and start to build kind of a connection with them. Different people in your organization are going to have different areas of expertise. And so it's always nice to have more than one writer of your blog. Okay, trend number 8, and you're going to love this one because what this one does is remove some of the pressure off your plate. So when social media sort of first took the world by storm, there was this idea of like, I need to be on every social media channel that comes along. First of all, that's not scalable. And now that we have hundreds of social media channels, essentially, that's just not realistic. So what we know is this is aligning with a 2022 trend where consumers aren't necessarily expecting you to be on every channel what they're expecting is that you're executing really, really well on the channels that you are on. So it's no longer about being on every platform. It's about being the best at the platforms you choose. So now is a really good time to take a look and evaluate what social media channels that you may have started and then dropped off, which ones are easiest for you to do really well, and just go ahead and move those dead channels off your plate. Stop worrying about them. Start focusing on doing the 2 to 3 channels, if that's the case, that you can keep up with really, really well. And then consider what platforms best align with your audience. So some of you might have, audiences where it behooves you to be on platforms like Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok because your audience skews younger. So use your audience demographics to align which channels that you're focusing on. And consistency is key, just like with blogging. Start with a goal that is reasonable. So if that for you is like, hey, I think I can do a post once a week, start with once a week. Again, nobody wants to show up to your social media channels and see that you haven't posted in a year. So get rid of the dead channels, do the channels that align with you and your bandwidth and your audience, and do those really, really well. And then, is there content that you can easily repurpose? So one of the cool things once Facebook acquired Instagram is that you can very easily post from Facebook to Instagram or Instagram to Facebook. And if what you have the bandwidth for is posting the same thing from Facebook onto Instagram, that's okay. In an ideal world, do you want to be posting like slightly different things or different things? Yes, in an ideal world. But if what you can do and have the capability of doing right now is repurposing that content, that's fine. Go and do that until you can start switching it up a little bit. Okay, trend number 9. So this is the one that I find most exciting of all of the trends. And this is the one where people might hear this and think, that's never really going to apply to me. But remember, when websites were first a thing, when internet was first a thing, when social media was first a thing, there were a lot of naysayers that were like, that's never really going to apply to me. And now it pretty much applies to everybody. And so trend number 9 is about virtual reality and augmented reality. And I wouldn't be presenting this trend to you unless I thought it was here to stay. And I truly, truly believe that it is here to stay. And even if you are not an early adopter of this, which is fine, it's still something to have in the back of your mind, and let the ideas of how you could possibly incorporate this in the future, let that start to marinate so that you can sort of be ahead of the curve when it starts to apply to your business. The reason that I have the Van Gogh ad up here is one of the coolest experiences that I had over the past year was going to the Van Gogh immersive experience. And this is an excellent example of how virtual reality and augmented reality are making their way into all different sorts of industries, including the arts. And so when you go to the Van Gogh immersive experience, you're literally in a room at one point where you feel like you're in the center of a Van Gogh painting. The paintings are on these extremely high walls and you're just immersed in it. There's augmented reality art exhibits on the wall. There are exhibits where things look 3D and you hear some of Van Gogh's letters being written. It's a whole new way to experience art. And it's a way to bring art in such a unique way, I think, to people that may think, I'm not really a stuffy museum type of person, but this way of presenting it is so super cool. And as part of that experience, there was a virtual reality portion of things where literally you put the goggles on and suddenly I'm walking down a path through the village that Van Gogh was born in. You're inside of the painting. And I was like, I see how people could literally sit here and just do this all day. It felt real and it was just so amazing. Such a good example of how, again, this technology is making its way into every single industry. And I think at one point it will apply to almost every single business in one form or another. So, what is the difference between the two? Virtual reality is a completely immersive experience that replaces a real life environment with a simulated one. So, when you're putting the goggles on, suddenly my reality has disappeared and I'm in this immersed world that has been created for me. Augmented reality changes your surroundings by adding digital elements to what your live view is. And I'll show you some examples of these. So what we're seeing is that worldwide AR and VR, the market size is forecasted to grow to $209 billion in 2022. So this is a worldwide phenomenon at this point. And what we see on the consumer side is that global AR and VR application downloads are expected to hit 5.5 billion in the next year. So this is something that consumers are taking advantage of. They're responding to extremely well. One thing that the past 2 years did is force us, like it or not, to bring so many things online. And that has stuck in a lot of ways. And so virtual reality and augmented reality really kind of took center stage in many ways by necessity over these last 2 years. Okay, so how are businesses using this? So here are some examples of how businesses are using this right now. So virtual previews. So instead of guessing what a product looks like in your home, you can actually use AR to preview it. So this is where, hey, I'm interested in buying a couch, and the business gives me the experience of being able to use an app on my phone where I can take a picture of my room, and then I can place the couch and see what it would look like in my actual room. So you can see how previews of this way improve user experience, and they can really drive somebody to making an informed purchasing decision that they're going to be happy with. Another example are virtual storerooms. So instead of having to pick ourselves up and go into a store and look at products, virtual storerooms could be a solution to that. So imagine being able to essentially turn an empty space into a virtual showroom. People might arrive, and instead of the products actually being there, they're putting on a headset and they're viewing things that way. One of the things that we are seeing is companies like Kia, who are actually doing virtual storerooms, and people can virtually drive their dream cars to test these things out. And so this is just sort of, like I said, kind of early adopters. These are some of the ways that they are using virtual and augmented reality. Another example that you've probably seen at this point is augmented reality technology that allows consumers to try things on. So, hey, I'm, on the store website and I can't decide between a navy shirt or an army green shirt, but I'm allowed to use a real picture of myself and essentially try the shirt on. This is being applied to clothing and makeup and other kinds of products that people can use to help make their purchasing decisions. And then what we kind of see is that this is driving a situation where consumers may be more immediately happy with their initial purchases because they've had sort of a preview of it, which also is beneficial to your business. You can see how in the real estate market, this can be wildly effective. So VR is expected to play a huge role in that industry. So imagine instead of having to go to an open house yourself or view and tour an apartment in person, that you could have a VR experience that would allow you to feel like you're actually in the space and touring it that way. So that is another way that virtual and augmented reality are expected to play a role. I went really fast, which means we have extra time. So I'll be glad to take questions. I will say that the other question, and this is on the list of trends, although we didn't address it here, some people have been asking me about SEO and if SEO is going to continue to be effective and something you should be spending your money on. And from what we can tell, yes, SEO is absolutely going to be something that you should be paying attention to. SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it's essentially a fancy way of essentially Google evaluating you on how user-friendly and relevant your website is, not just on the obvious things like your visual and your content, but on all of the tricky back-end technical things that you need to do to set up an effective website. And then again, all of that impacts your ranking as well. So just keep SEO in mind for 2022 as well. So at this point, I can open up the floor to questions. If it's helpful, I can go revisit some of the previous trends and some of those slides if that's helpful to people since we have more time, but it's really kind of up to you guys. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Oh,
Hey, this is Scott Bay. I just wanted to say thank you. You did a great job. I appreciate it very much.
oh, well, thank you so much. Yes, this is always a fun thing to present about. There's always kind of a mix of like new and old and tweaked things from years past. But like I said, in 2022, man, if you have not taken into consideration how consumer behavior and preferences have changed over the past 2 years, you're really leaving so much on the table. So I really appreciate everybody, being here to hear this information. I think it can be really helpful if you take it seriously. You'll also notice on the screen, I have my contact information. Feel free to reach out and contact me with any questions that might arise after the presentation. I'm always glad to help. And then we will also have a booth at the Ignite conference, which is next week. And I'll be there for that too. And maybe Courtney, do you want to give people more details about that before we go?
Yes, you read my mind. I just put that in the chat. So we do have our Ignite conference next week. That's our full day leadership and professional development conference. That's always a lot of fun, a great time. Our keynote speaker is Jason Bourne with Leading Strong LLC. He'll be talking about leadership development. Then we have speed networking. We have exhibitors just like Converge. We have lunch provided. We have swag. We have exhibitors. We have breakout sessions in the afternoon. There will be 3 different breakout sessions to choose from. You'll be able to go to 2 of those. We have one about mindfulness and healthiness at work, especially during these last couple of years that have been a little different. We have top 10 tech tools for business. That's hard to say. And then we also have our how not to get hacked for small and medium businesses. So all of those very important, timely topics. Tomorrow is the registration cutoff for Ignite. So be sure and use that link to get your tickets. It's always a lot of fun. We get great feedback on this conference, and we're excited that we're back in person this year after being virtual last year. So does anybody have any questions or follow-ups for Brooke before we wrap it up?
And just one note to end on, I had a meeting with an entrepreneur that we're working with yesterday. And one thing I just always like to say is, I know that for some of you, marketing is not your primary focus at your job. It's something that you're doing in conjunction with other things that you're doing. And even if it is your primary focus, you might be a little short on staff or be a one person department. And I always just like to encourage people, start where you can with what you can. You are most likely doing better than you think you are. And I can confidently say that about you, because you are taking the time to come to a presentation like this, which means you are dedicating some time and thought and effort into those things. So, I present a lot of information. There's a lot of takeaways and a lot of action items on there. But I just want to encourage you that, start with where you can, do what you can, and, build. And before you know it, you will have some of these things plugged in. So just don't be too hard on yourself if you can't tackle every single thing all at once.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke. This has been fantastic information. I know I've learned a lot, taken a bunch of notes over the last couple months. I remember that we do post these recordings on our website. So you have those, you can go back and reference them again and share them with others. So with that, I'm going to say have a great afternoon. We hope to see a lot of you at Business After Hours tomorrow night at Pendleton Community Bank in Stanton. They are doing a drive for Valley Missions. There's a list on our Facebook page and our website of items that they're looking for. So we hope to see you there. We have a ribbon cutting on Friday at Warehouse Auto Repair in Stanton to celebrate their new solar powered repair center, which is going to be really fun. So hopefully we'll see you all at some of those. Have a great afternoon.